Hello. This is a video about the Corvette C3 clock and how to fix it if you have the time, patience, and a little bit of experience with this kind of stuff. It's not too hard, but it took me probably about a week of just carefully opening this clock up and looking at it, and then also doing quite a bit of research. There's one really good video on YouTube by a gentleman, I will put the link in the description, who shows you how to fix a clock like this, but his is out of an airplane. It's out of a Cessna, so it's the same exact clock though, which is kind of cool to know. So now the way this clock operates is pretty unique and very interesting, I think. Normally it's not loose like this. I have actually already opened it up and worked on it and fixed it. So essentially it has a ground connection here to the casing, so where it mounts, right here is your ground, and then this is a hot positive connection of 12 volts. Now you can take this case apart very, very carefully by carefully bending the little tabs around the edge of this piece of the case, and then you can gently pull that off of there and you can see the movement inside. Now the way this thing works is pretty cool. There is the mechanical mechanism, which is in and of itself, this is a mechanical clock that needs to be wound. So in order to get wound, it has this contact system here where these two contacts meet. Let's see if I can get a better picture of that. Right here, this section moves, and that's the winder. And now that I've moved that down some, you can see that the clock actually is functional. So there's nothing wrong with the clock mechanism, but there is still something wrong with the clock. Now what happens over 45 years worth of sitting around doing its job, let me back up. So as this contact and winder move closer to this contact here, eventually they will come into contact with one another, and then when they do, that fires off the solenoid that's on the back side of this piece. So this solenoid engages, and it's an electromagnet, and when that electromagnet pulses, it will do so right about now, probably. No power, so nothing's going to happen. But when that happens, when these touch, this will pulse down, it'll kick that down, and it kicks this whole winder all the way down to the bottom of its stroke. So it'll go all the way down. It goes pretty far, and then that just winds it, and it winds for another minute or two, and then it keeps on going. That way the clock is not constantly using 12 volts. It's not consistently consuming electricity from your battery, and it only pulses a small bit of signal or of electricity every couple of minutes. That's why in a Corvette you'll hear this clock tick every minute or two, and that is what that is all about. So you're probably wondering, so what's the problem, right? Well, the problem is this wiring right here. This wiring is not original. This is my wiring I put in there. The original wiring, being 45 years old, will have degradation to the casing, to the insulation around the wiring, and it will degrade, and it will cause shorting to happen inside the wire, and eventually it won't have enough power to cause enough electromagnetic power to pull this lever back down. So the lever just sits here, the contact sits there, and you're constantly using 12 volts grounded, basically, at that point. So if you ever have a clock that doesn't work in your car, that's one of these clocks in your Corvette, and you have a battery leaking problem or battery draining problem, I would bet 99.9% of the time it's because of this, because of that solenoid no longer functioning to capacity. And so you're constantly just going to be draining your battery. So if that's the case, you should just disconnect the power to this or pull this clock out and do what I've done. So in order to fix this problem, I very, very carefully spread these little, or squeeze these little pins in. This plastic piece here is held in with these metal pins that are split on the ends. There's three. There's 1, 2, and 3. Oops, at the top here. And as you can see, they're pinched together now. And what that allows me to do is pull this whole section off very carefully. I just want to wiggle it off of there. Now that is the electromagnetic part, and this of course is the mechanical part. So I'm just going to set it aside. Now the way you want to fix this, what I did was I just happened to have some old pinball coils lying around that are not good for pinball anymore, but the wiring is still pretty good. Now granted, I'm not being very smart here because I am using wiring that is probably also 40 years old, so it's probably not the smartest thing. I would highly recommend that you buy new wiring, because newer wiring will have a better coating on it anyway. So what you do is this lever here is held on simply with this spring. So you can actually, just using some gentle force, you can lift it off of that end of the spring and lift it out like this, and you can separate that. I try to keep the spring attached to that so I don't lose it, and I hold it on there with my finger, and I will take that and set that aside. And then you can, if you're very, very careful, and I don't want to do this right now because I've already got this wired up, but you can spread these little plastic ends, or the metal ends that are holding it into the plastic. You can squeeze those inward because they're just a spread out. A machine probably just spreads those out to clamp that solenoid body into this piece of plastic or plexi. And then you can gently lift this piece out. I don't know if you can see that, but it's kind of loose sitting in there. I still have to squeeze those back out. So anyway, just trying to get that to seat better. I don't know if this is the best winding job. I will probably have to redo that, but it actually does work. So essentially you pull this out. What I did was I ran one end of the wire, which you can see here, and I soldered it to the casing. The original wire was just sitting inside. It was not even soldered to anything. It was just in the center of this post. Well, against the post and inside the winding, which I thought was kind of odd because it was not connected to anything. I don't know if it just disconnected itself inside or what. Maybe it is actually somehow bonded to this post in the middle. It's interesting. I'm getting some magnetism there. But anyway, once you rewind this, and you can find videos on how to wind a solenoid, just solder the other end to this solder joint, which connects it to this post. So then you can very carefully, oops, that's not easy, reconnect this spring on here. It's already hard to do, but trying to do it on camera is even harder. And then using your fingers, just lift it up and over. There we go. And set it back on there. So you need that springing to happen. And then once you get that done, you can reattach this. You need to push this down a little bit and then reattach this. And you would spread these back out and remount it in the case and be done. So that is effectively how you repair the solenoid of one of these clocks, and I think that's going to probably work for me. The only thing I'm concerned about is whether or not that's the right wiring to use, because it is kind of old, but I think I'll just leave it since it does work. And that's my tip for the week on Corvette or other Corvette type repairs. These clocks, I imagine, are in a lot of things. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. Bye.